program. And so we're here, though, to talk about the Kennedy connection, but also the moonshot, Apollo 11, and what's going on in the International Space Station. And I wanted to begin with Dr. Tracy Caldwell-Dyson, who was selected as an astronaut in 1998. You need to know that she was born August 14th, 1969, just days after Apollo 11. And her mother, Mary Ellen, is here, who was pregnant watching Neil Armstrong on the moon and gave birth to a future astronaut. She's from California, as mentioned, has spent over 188 days in space. Tell us what the Kennedy legacy means to you and Apollo 11, and how you got involved with the International Space Station.
Well, I'd like to think that my mom inspired me before I even entered this world by making it an important day for not just the entire country, but for our household. I think the Apollo missions and the first landing on the moon, like has been said all this morning, has really launched as much inspiration as it has technological advances. And so growing up, I never knew a time that we did not have a space program. And was my parents, again, who inspired me to make a list of all the things that I enjoyed doing in my life in an attempt to help me determine what I wanted to be. And at the time I wrote these things on my list like any 16-year-old would do, I had no idea that it would lead to becoming an astronaut.
When Kennedy was president, there were Mercury 13 women astronauts that were trained, but alas, they didn't get to go due to the criterion of being having to have had a flight pilot and particularly war experience as a pilot, if possible, with the Mercury astronauts. But there were women that early in the 60s. Sally Ride is the first American in 1983. What did Sally Ride mean to you? Was there a feeling of being a woman in a space that it was going to be harder to kind of shatter the glass ceiling, or did Sally Ride already do that in 1983 for you?
I gotta hand it to Sally. She made it look really normal. I grew up in a household where I was never told that girls don't do that. So I think I give, again, credit to my parents for shattering any glass ceiling for me. But it was Sally who did her job well and didn't make it seem too extraordinary that a woman was doing that. And then others like Dr. Ellen Ochoa, who followed many of us ladies before we ever got there, that just did what they do, and they did it well. And it was nice to see that there was a mixture of genders, that it never occurred to me that I might be unique in wanting to do that.
How did you get recruited for the International Space Station, and what was the process? How did you get chosen, and where were you when you were picked, and what's the backstory to that?
To be on the International Space Station, I think all of us up here would agree that's a mystery. We have no idea how we get chosen for that.
Yeah, well, did you get a phone call from somebody, or?
Well, we all get a phone call when we've been selected into the astronaut corps, and we each have a very fascinating story about that. It's unique to all of us, the surprise and the elation. And even Chris has made a few of those phone calls to other new astronauts. But to find out that you are going to be on a mission to go to one of the most incredible engineering marvels of the world is at first you feel very undeserving, and then you realize you got a long road ahead of you to get prepared for it. So it's a mixture of personal gratification as well as professional satisfaction.
We've had now 12 moonwalkers, all Americans, yet we still haven't had a woman on the moon. Would you like to go to the moon?
Heck yeah. I don't know which one wouldn't. Heck yeah.
Do you ever just look at the moon and think, gosh, I'm going to land there someday?
I hope someday. I don't think I'm alone in that, but yes, absolutely.
You do. Great. Next to me here is Captain Christopher Cassidy. He was selected as an astronaut by NASA in 2004. He grew up, born in Salem, Massachusetts, and considers York, Maine his home. And you all need to know the most important thing about him for this audience. He is a Patriots, Bruin, and Celtics fan. What, now you were involved with many people don't realize John F. Kennedy, founded the Green Beret and the SEALs in addition to the Peace Corps, and he liked this idea of these corps. You were a SEAL. How does a Navy SEAL get involved with space?
Well, that's a great question. I'm often asked that, and fortunately for me, I had a trailblazer, much like Sally Ride was for Tracy. Bill Shepard was chosen as a SEAL to become an astronaut about 20 years my senior. And when I met him is when the light bulb dawned on me that it's something that I could do as well. But the intersection of the two careers has been really fascinating. And as you mentioned that just now, it kind of pulls it all together. Kind of ironic that we're here at the President JFK Library, where in 1962, the SEALs were founded, and I've had a foot in both of those careers. It's been really cool.
Is there anything from being a SEAL that has been applicable to space that surprises you?
That surprises me? Well, when I first became an astronaut, you have to learn how to be an operator in space. And the one thing that the SEAL community did for me was I learned how to be an operator in a different environment. But those skills translated very nicely. Making decisions, talking on the radio, chewing gum, all at the same time. and I think that set me up for success early on. Now, NASA training is really fantastic, and everybody catches on quickly. But just right off the get-go, I felt very well prepared for all the training that was ahead of us.
What does Apollo 11 anniversary mean to you? Here we are 50 years later, looking back at Neil Armstrong's incredible moment.
For me, it's really about how that set us up for what we're about to do. We're living in a really exciting time. It was fascinating to hear Dennis's talk this morning about what Boeing has going on and the mix of all of that. I got to tell you, it's really fascinating to be inside the astronaut office at this present moment where we have SLS preparing for Moon and Mars. We have commercial companies getting to the International Space Station. We're still launching with our Russian colleagues on the Soyuz. All of that happening, and you're walking around the halls. We have about 40 astronauts, and at any given day, there's no way you're going to find 40 astronauts in the hallway. They're all scattered off doing training. But the ones you do see, you can just tell the level of excitement is ratcheting up as we're entering this period.
Great. Now, as of March 2019, we had 236 people from 18 countries that had visited the International Space Station, 149 US and multiple times, but Russia 47, Japan 9. But leading the way, it might surprise people from the European Union, is Italy. And I wanted to next call on Paolo Nespoli about the European Space Agency and your connection with NASA, and how did you growing up in Italy get so engaged in space exploration? What was your inspiration?
Well, I was lucky enough that when the American astronauts were going to the moon and the Russians were going to space, I was a little kid, and I was looking at these people growing up in a little town in the middle of nowhere in Italy, and seeing especially the American astronaut on the lunar rover, when people would ask me, "So Paolo, what do you want to do when you grow up?" "Yeah, I want to be an astronaut. I want to go on the moon, on the lunar rover." And they would look at me and say, "Whoa, that's a good idea. Study, you will go." Then it will turn around, nye, 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 nye. Because, what were the chances, at that time that a little guy in the middle of nowhere would go to space? There were a few Americans, few Russians, that was it. And so I did not even believe myself in this dream. In fact, it took me quite a long time before really starting working on this one. But Italy was fairly active in space. It had a very good aeronautical industry built during World War II, and that translated nicely into space. So when the Americans started to fly with the space shuttle, Italy, through the European Space Agency, proposed to build a space lab, which was the first actually space lab that flew in space from the American side. And from that, the cooperation continued, and partly through the European Space Agency that was involved with the space station and the space shuttle, Italy built also some other modules, and that's why today we do have some direct agreement both from Italy to the United States, to NASA, and through the European Space Agency to send astronauts in space. I was lucky enough then in 1998 to be selected as an astronaut. Tracy, we were in the same class. She was the youngest one. I was almost the oldest one. Almost, but very close to be the oldest one. And I was lucky enough to be able to fly on the space shuttle, which is was and is still, in my opinion, an incredible machine. And then lucky enough to fly in space on the Soyuz spacecraft and be in space for a long duration mission.
Your career, you started as a design engineer, is that correct? Or how did you get actually, how did you start getting
It's a very complicated thing. I'm known for never taking the straight path, you know. I always get there sooner or later, but I have to go around, wander around a little bit. So with this idea, I want to be an astronaut, but you cannot do it. I didn't really know what to do in life. So when I finished high school, I was kind of thinking, what should I do? And I got drafted by the Army. At that time in Italy, there was draft. So I said, okay, I'm going to go for this compulsory year of military training, and then I will decide. But when I was in the Army, I actually ended up being a paratrooper, and I actually liked the fact that they kind of took me out of the little town where I was and started throwing me around, started pushing so that I would test the boundary that I think were around me. You know, I cannot go there. Well, try. But they would push me, and I figure out, that was not really a wall. You know, it was a wall, but made of paper. And I keep going like this, and I ended up working for the Italian Special Forces. So I also was in the Special Forces, not the Navy side, the Army side, sorry. But then, you know, I ended up even being deployed in Middle East and the multinational peacekeeping force in the 80s. And after that, when I came back from that, I said, okay, now I'm 26. I think I know myself a little bit more. What do I want to be? What do I want to do? And that's when I thought, oh, I should be an astronaut. But, you know, I'm 26. I don't speak English. I don't have a university degree. I better start working on it before it's too late. And there I started. So eventually, I got a degree in aerospace engineering. I did work in Italy as an engineer, as a design and engineer. I was lucky enough to work for one of the great experiments that flew on the space shuttle, the Tether satellite system. I worked on one of the experiments that was on that one. And then I was selected by the European Space Agency to work as a training engineer. I always wanted to be an astronaut. And as everybody, I don't know how many, you know, there were many people in our class that succeeded at their third, fourth, fifth, sixth selection. Mine was the third one. And while I was trying to be an astronaut, I worked as an engineer because that's what I like to do.
And he has spent 313 days in space?
Yes.
And we're going to go and talk about their actual time on the International Space Station after we get through. I incidentally had done the official oral history of Neil Armstrong for NASA. And one of my big takeaways from that, spending a day, 8 hours with Armstrong, is he told me as a humanities person, historian, you guys have to write more about engineering. That we don't honor engineers in history enough. And then took, as Ambassador Kennedy alluded to earlier, 400,000 Americans, engineers. You know, the reason Armstrong avoided the publicity and celebrity, he felt he was one person in this entire enterprise like all of you do. I want to bring Japan into our conversation. Dr. Koichi Wakata, and he is, you know, well, let me just ask you, I mean, when did Japan start getting into space? And also, I know you were very young when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin went on the moon, but how did the American NASA Apollo program influence your childhood and your career trajectory?
Well, I lived in Houston, Texas many years, but it was, I think, September 12th of 1962 when President Kennedy delivered this famous address of a nation's space effort. at the Rice University. Of course, that was before I was born. And I still vividly remember the Apollo 11 lunar landing when I was 5 years old. And at the time, we didn't have a space program in Japan. Actually, the Japanese Space Agency was formed 4 months after Apollo 11 lunar landing. So we did not have a space program at the time. But I had a strong longing for flying in space, and I cherished that desire since then, and that's the reason why I'm here with you today. So I'm always grateful to President Kennedy for giving us the dream of flying in space. Actually, I think the Apollo mission ignited the fascination and enthusiasm of exploring space among many countries following the United States. And thanks to the international cooperation of the space station program, I was lucky to be able to be selected as a national candidate from Japan and sent over to Houston. And my mentors are here, Charlie Bolden and Ellen Ochoa. I learned from them. Actually, I was not like Paolo, I was the youngest in the class of 1992. And I received a pacifier that says remove before flight. So, and that was a good one. And so I am very thankful to the great training program in NASA that made me ready to fly on the space shuttle missions as well as on the space station. So international collaboration is the key for many countries to join this bold vision of exploring in space.
Now, I said, I think, I gave your number and everybody in the audience went, ooh, how many hours and days you've spent in space. You have spent 347 days in space. Has it affected you in any way, your physical health, spending that many days in space? We're going to get to health in a minute. But what does that mean? What does that do to the body, spending that many days in space?
Actually, we have really great exercise device on board. If you don't do an exercise, you will tend to lose bone density as well as muscle strength. But now we have really great running machine, bike machine, and also resistive exercise device. So we will be able to maintain our strength and bone density as well. And food is very important. We have great food with variety, and actually Japanese food is very popular too. So I think physically we have to be fit, and psychologically we have to fit. I think food plays an important role in keeping us very healthy psychologically. So it's great to have Russian food, American food, Italian coffee as well, and including the Japanese food. Right now we don't have sushi yet because it's a fresh thing. So hopefully in the future when we go, not back to the moon, but go forward to the moon, hopefully we'll have sushi on the moon.
Our last is Dr. Oleg Kotov. He is from Russia. And he is really an expert on medical issues dealing with space and health in space when you're spending that many days there. He's an absolutely extraordinary resume, but I wanted to focus today a little bit on his on the physiology. What does it mean for a body? How we're talking about space travel. We're taking that maybe tourism in space. What would a potential tourist in space have to do to get ready for space? And what do you have to do for a long duration if you're at the International Space Station?
That's a great question. First of all, I would like to be here with you at this great event, and I appreciate as a JFK library to invite me as a part of the Russian space team and Russian cosmonaut team here. So I'm answering your question, saying about the space participants or space tourists. Fortunately, I flew with 2 of them during my first mission. So we don't have any big issue with medical status or about the health problem with space participants. And I guess we're gonna have the same approach for the private space flyers, what is going to be more common in the nearest future. So what the space flyers or participants should do during the space, don't bother the main crew. So that's yeah, so that's very important. And again, if we are talking about medical selection and medical criteria for long-duration space flights, it's going to be absolutely different from what we have now for low Earth orbit. And all space agencies, as well as the Russian Space Agency and IMBP, I'm working for Institute of Biomedical Problem in Russia. It's the main responsible organization for medical care of cosmonaut and astronaut for space flights. So the main problem is we should to build a completely new system how to provide the medical care and health care for astronaut and cosmonaut during the flight of the moon and beyond. And so it's really interesting direction. And talking about the future space flights, we're completely ready to send the machines or vehicles to the moon and keep working there and send them to the Mars and operate them over there. But the main issue that we protect, why we're not able to send the people there is a medical problem. So we're still working to provide enough level, a good level to have the people work safely in the moon vicinity and for long duration time period, and especially on the surface on the Mars. So again, it's pretty interesting thing, and talking about inspiration in my childhood, so that's I was inspired, of course, Yuri Gagarin first flight, and first Alexei Leonov, first man who performed EVA in the space, and as well as Apollo 11 and all other missions on the surface of the moon, and why I always wanted to be a cosmonaut, from the youngest age. But why I went to medicine? I went to space medicine because I thought in this time period, so by time I'll grow up enough to be selected as a cosmonaut, people should fly towards the moon or to the Mars or other planets, and I thought, what is a profession is should be needed for these flights? Medical doctor for sure, maybe pilot, maybe engineer, maybe some biology scientist, but medical doctor for sure. And that's why I decided, am I going to medicine, and by the time I'll be big enough, I'll be people already would fly to another planet. But what we see now, if we take a look on our past, on the 60s last age. So we have first man flight, first woman flight, first EVA in every year, first docking, first man on the surface on the moon, the first space station. We were ready to fly a long time around on the LEO, and you have the temp or how we progress in space industry was very fast. But later on, you see this like a continue our way to flying on the LEO, the long duration flight, perform more science exploration. But in general saying, we're just completing all our experience. What I'm talking about, we are ready for next leap for the whole community in space. And returning to the moon and fly to the Mars is the same project. We can aggregate people, all nations together, and let us fly forward and do something absolutely unique in our nearest future. So let's fly.
We too often talk about John F. Kennedy and the challenge of beating Russia to the moon, which was true. But the respect that NASA had for the Soviet program and what the cosmonauts were doing was sky high. And in fact, President Kennedy himself admired Gagarin tremendously for the grit and courage. And do you realize when Apollo 11, we always focus on Neil Armstrong's first line, that's one giant step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. But right when Armstrong and Aldrin are leaving, Armstrong says, "Did you leave the packet to Aldrin?" And in that packet were medals commemorating our 3 Apollo 1 astronauts who died at Cape Canaveral, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. In 1967, they perished in a fireball. But we also left medals honoring Soviet cosmonauts, including Gagarin, for their bravery in their space program. Gagarin died in an airplane accident in the mid-60s. The point is, at our site there on the moon are medals honoring Russians. And that spirit is there with NASA, and it led to the International Space Station. And in fact, in 1975, Russia docked in space with the United States. And it's been a collaborative effort with Russian rockets really leading the charge often in our current times. Let me go back around now and establish a little bit of rapport and pick up with Dr. Dyson. Give us just an idea of what a day is like in space at the International Space Station. I mean, I know there's not all days are different, but what's the kind of routine that you establish?
Well, just describe it in a word, it's busy. And it was funny when we started the International Space Station program, coming through decades of the shuttle program, we thought, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But those of us who have lived up there realize it's just a very long sprint. So what a typical day is like if there's no visiting vehicle that a robotic arm operator has to capture in free space, if there's no spacewalk that you're gonna go out and do with your partner to spend 6.5 to 8 glorious hours as your own satellite repairing the space station. Some other exciting things are what's going on in our Russian segment with our cosmonaut partners and the things that we do to help get them out the door to do the same thing. A typical day today on an International Space Station is a crew of 3 or 4 in the US segment and then 2 in the Russian segment doing maintenance on board the space station, doing a number of scientific experiments, reaching out to the public, and then performing either medical checkups on ourselves or as part of an experiment. I mean, the guys can chime in with some other specifics, but a daily routine for us is we get up around, it would be 6 a.m. here basically, and we have a few minutes to get ready. Everything from combing your, well, why would you comb your hair? For me, it would be putting my hair in a ponytail, brushing your teeth, the usual morning routine, having your coffee, your breakfast, and then perhaps seeing one of your crewmates, but then you all come together for what's called the Daily Planning Conference, which is a conference around the world with the control centers from Houston to Huntsville to Munich to Scuba to Russia. And each one of the crew members are engaged in that conversation, and hopefully it lasts only a couple of minutes, so then we can get right onto our timeline. And then from there, we all, if the 5 of us were on orbit together, we'd have our own band that had discrete blocks of tasks, and sometimes we'd be working together, and the timeline would show that. Sometimes we'd be working alone, and then sometimes we'd be coordinated with people on the ground, be it a investigator of a scientific experiment or one of our engineers on the ground that's helping us prepare for something, a big critical task on orbit, to a number of things. And we go through that throughout the entire day. We have a midday meal, around noon Earth time, and then we end with another conference called the Evening Daily Plan Conference, or the Evening DPC, which kind of wraps up the day and gives us anything we might need to think about overnight until we get up the next morning and do it all over again. In between that are some self-care tasks that need no explanation. You got to find out when you're going to do them. Things like showering and all that. But we have about 2.5 hours of planned exercise, and that also includes getting ready for the exercise as well as cleaning up from it. But exercise, as Koichi mentioned, really big deal on orbit to not only maintain our health while we're in space, but also to prepare us for landing, which is can be a difficult period, a transition for anybody's body once you're introduced back into gravity.
Oh, well, great. That is a full. And can you? How do you sleep? And don't you see so many sunsets? Or like, 15, 16 sunsets. How can you sleep with the sun rising and setting all the time?
You would see them if you weren't working and looking out the window the whole time, but there are some very spacious windows that we have in the cupola, as well as a few other observational windows in various modules, the Japanese module and the Russian segment, etc. But we don't spend much of our time looking out the window to see all these sunsets and sunrises, but when you do get a chance to do it, it is spectacular and unforgettable. And it does make an impression on you that lasts eternity, or the rest of yours anyway. And it's true that the space station itself inside is a work environment. You work where you live where you work. The lights on inside the space station kind of get you in the mood for working, and just the pace of the day and the operations that you're expecting kind of keep you in pace. And so there's not much distracting you because you know that you've got a whole globe down there that's counting on you to get some work done for them. And but when you do have those moments to look out the window, it is one of the most life-changing events, and I think any one of us up here would tell you that that's one reason why we need to have other people come and take a look at that.
Can you sleep? Have you ever slept floating?
Oh, yeah, I think we all
You
do.
just sit and float. You don't have to be buckled up or anything to sleep. You can.
You can
That
sleep
method is fraught
floating.
with peril.
Yeah.
The buckle up method or the free?
non-buckle,
Oh, the free
Yeah.
float. Because
Yeah.
wouldn't you hit your head or worry about an injury?
Yeah, you got to worry about airflow because that's kind of what propels you, especially if you're in the space station in your crew quarter. We have sleeping bags, but they're not as much to keep you warm as they are to keep you stationary. On the shuttle, when we used to fly the shuttle, there were no, on every flight, a separate compartment for you to sleep in. So you needed a sleeping bag to keep you in place, or you bungee yourself somewhere so you don't move. But yeah, sleeping in space, and one of the other guys can chime in too, that is one of, I think, a very peaceful thing. It's strange because if you're a person that likes to have your head on a pillow, you're not going to experience that. Even if you strap it to your head, it's not the same thing. They have a strap, though. There's a strap for you to put it around your head so you can feel the pillow, but you don't feel the pillow. But for me, it was really peaceful. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, Captain Cassidy, so I have a daughter named Cassidy, and I told her I was doing this. She's 14, and similar what the lifestyle's like there. I didn't have an answer for her. She wondered, how do you shower in space? Is it possible?
We don't. That's a simple answer. You spend 6 months without a shower, but quite truthfully, you don't feel that icky. You have baby wipes. You can squirt a blob of water on you with a bar of soap and kind of wiggle it around. That's hard to get the soapy suds off you, but nonetheless, you really don't feel that dirty. But hair is probably one thing. I had Karen Nyberg on my crew, and every Sunday she would go through the process of washing her hair, and she would always complain about how jealous she was of us with our shaved bald heads, and she was combing it out. So that did take a while, and that was a once-a-week activity for her, but the rest of us on our crew anyways kept our hair fairly short just because it's much easier to keep clean.
What about, do you ever feel oxygen deprived, that you're worried about you're not getting enough oxygen, or are you ever worried about your breathing patterns, or you're so trained that doesn't affect you at all?
We can very tightly control the atmosphere on the space station, and we monitor that very closely, and oxygen is something that we, in Mission Control, pay close attention to. And carbon dioxide, however, is an effort that we constantly keep as low as we can. The machines have ability to get to a certain level, but sometimes different people, their individual organism deals with it differently. So some folks have a higher tolerance for carbon dioxide levels than others, and it induces headaches, it induces kind of grumpiness, maybe leads you to have momentary lapse in judgment. So CO2 is something that we individually as a crew pay attention to each other, because it's often hard for yourself to know when you're being really grumpy.
Yeah, well,
I'm a perfect guy. What do you mean?
Yeah. Are there ever any feuds? Or you are trained never to disagree or argue with each other?
I think feuds is probably a stretch, but we're all human beings, and sometimes you just want to go to your private space and be away. But more often than not, I think the therapy for all of us is to kind of be together around the dinner table with different music playing, shuffling on the music system, and eating Italian or Japanese or Russian food. My Russian crewmate, Sasha Masurkin, he really liked chocolate pudding that the Americans had, and I liked baranina, lamb, so we would always have this trade, and that was part of the fun.
So you all seem to have a great camaraderie together, and you're proud that you all are veterans of the International Space Station, and it's like an exclusive club, in a sense.
It is indeed, and we know each other really well. Like we're all of us cycle through Russia. All of the cosmonauts come through Houston. We know each other's families. We know about each other's children, and that goes a long way. And it really forms the bonds in this training environment that makes a crew successful.
Right now, Paolo, you guys are living up there on the International Space Station in coordinated universal time. Is there one time, is that the time that you live by in space? I mean, how do you deal with time differences?
Well, it gets very confused. If you look outside of the window, you figure out it's time to sleep, it's time to wake up. It's time to sleep, it's time to wake up. 16 sunrises, 16 sunsets, 16 breakfasts, if you think about it. So in order to avoid this kind of confusion, we use UTC. And I mean, once you set your watch and that's the time, that's it. It's interesting, sometimes we change the time because there are some operational activities that cannot be moved around, like, I don't know, a spacecraft is coming and you need to grab it, or there is something else happening. So they change the time on the station. That's when it gets really confusing. I mean, I flew in 2010-11, we had 2 space shuttle coming, several Russian vehicles. I mean, we were changing the time all the time, and it was really, really confusing. It's a little bit more stable now. But you get used to it, and it's fine.
How was it the International Space Station assembled, and how do you have to deal with malfunctions or if you have to fix parts? I guess a good day on the space station is where there's no problem, but what a bad day is when you have a particular maintenance problem, I would assume. How does one go about addressing, I know it'd be whatever the issue is that you're having trouble with, but in general, how has it been assembled and how do you have maintenance on the space station?
It's a very complex machine, the space station. It was built in 20 years. It started in 1998 with some pieces launched with the Russian vehicles. 35 space shuttle brought pieces in space. I flew an STS-120 that brought up one of the nodes in space. So it took quite some time to build the space station. And obviously, when you do this kind of huge structure where pieces are built all over the world, you have to be pretty meticulous in establishing interfaces and establishing way of working. And in fact, we have huge documents. So we can build something in Torino, in Italy, and then bring it up and join it to a piece built in by Boeing here in the United States, or with Japan, and that's how it works. You need to be methodical, engineering, have documentation, interfaces, and this goes through also with all the operation manual of the space station. I mean, everything, it's not that you go up and you think, oh, how am I going to do this? Somebody has already thought about this. There are meticulous procedures for everything. Everything you need to do, somebody already thought about it, and you just have to execute these things. There was a long study made in terms of what can go wrong. We have different classes of malfunctioning, from the little thing that, if something is broken, we'll fix it, who cares, or to something that is an emergency, where the crew stops what it's doing and addresses that emergency immediately because that's life-threatening situation.
What was the worst emergency you've had to deal with?
On the space station? Well, we had one pretty good on the space shuttle on STS-120 when one of the solar panels started ripping apart when we were deploying it again. And for that, we had to do I wouldn't say an emergency, but an unplanned spacewalk, which was pretty daring. That was pretty good. It's interesting. It's interesting. I flew, my first long duration flight was in 2010, 10 and 11. And we had several alarms, nothing serious, but almost every day there was something breaking. I remember the toilet, sorry for that, but every time you go to the toilet, you finish, you turn it off, and you pray. There's a panel with about 20 lights. What lights is coming on now? what I will have to do to fix it? And that was 2010 and 11. And I was so surprised when I flew 2017. I was so conditioned to turn off and being there like that I would turn it off, be there, and poof, everything goes dark. And I'm like, no malfunctions? Oh, that's good. Okay, tomorrow. And by the 2 weeks' time and nothing was happening, I asked the other guys, hey, how's it going? He says, well, yeah, it's not malfunctioning. That means that we learn how to make things work. Yeah. We learn from 2010 to 2017, there was an increase in time spent actually working on the space station and not fixing it. And that's what it means being up there and have experience. So it's interesting how we do things and we make things better. I guess when we go back to the moon, we will do the same. We will learn to be in space, build an outpost, and do this kind of things. So I'm looking forward.
Dr. Wakata, I know you're not a space architect, but here you are living this many days on the International Space Station. What would you like to see change? If you could, what's the missing thing? Is there the thought of no shower or no ability to do that? Or is there another thing that if you had a magic wand, you could change the architectural design of the International Space Station?
Well, that's an interesting question. Of course, we are floating, but as a Japanese, who likes to have a hot bath, in a hot spring, I really want to have a hot bath.
All right,
but then you have a
NASA's gotta
centrifuge
get
to
you
rotate.
guys baths.
So
That's
other than that, it was very comfortable.
And is there any features you wish would be added? Any new kind of technology or things you really feel you're missing when you start spending a lot of days there?
Well, I think, as I mentioned about this bath, water use is very limited. We brush your teeth, and then we don't shower. We just wipe, with towel. But if we had a chance to use the water more freely, that's going to be more comfortable. And actually, on board the station, we have a recycle system of water and air. Actually, we recycle urine and sweat into a potable water. So as our colleague Don Pettit mentioned, it's in space, we turn yesterday's coffee into tomorrow's coffee, and it tastes really good because you don't know where it came from. Actually, it comes from everybody, so it tastes okay. But so if we can make this water recycle system more efficient, more affordable, then we should be able to use water more freely. And I think our Boeing person was talking about the commercialization and space tourism. When the time comes, probably this kind of technology of recycling water and air more efficiently will be very helpful for more tourists to be attractive for the space tourists.
Very good. Oleg, have you had a chance to see Alan Shepard's capsule here? Have you ever seen the original, 1960s capsules? I mean, what do you think about the health risk of that generation? That they were, there's 50, Neil Armstrong thought he had a 50-50 chance of the mission being successful, but just being shot up the way Alan Shepard was and all of that, what do you think about when you see that kind of early space capsule?
Yes, for me it's very difficult to say what the risk was there or we have now, because the space flights, human space flights, is a risky business still. And every mission probably has any malfunctions, any off-nominal situation during the flight. And even the health risk, it's technical risk, health risk, and I don't expect we have space flight becomes safe or even like airplane safe in the near future. It's still we will face our dangerous during space flight, even for private space flights, for especially for long duration space flight. It's not only long duration, but flights behind the Earth orbit. And little bit aside to this effect, this is my first visit to the Boston, but I have a good imagination of your city because I flew with Sunny Williams, as she was a part of my first mission. And one time when I opened my eyes and heard, in the Russian segment, we have a crew quarter close to the treadmill. And unexpectedly, just I was wake up during the midnight, the patient's midnight, opened the eyes and heard something very strange outside. It's like something running and machine is running. Opened the door from headquarters and saw the Sunny Williams running the Boston full marathon. Really, with the tag and with everything, with camera. And I will say, what's going on, Sunny? What's going on? I'm running the full marathon. And he running just with people on the ground, on earth, and running 100% marathon. He was just so great. So this, again, so thank you, Boston.
We're going to open this up pretty soon for questions, and we'll be doing it using a microphone with the audience standing mics, so get your questions in mind if you have any. But while we're on the medical issue, I'm worried about balance disorders. How does one, do you have to, don't people's whole equilibrium get compromised? I mean, and how do you keep your immune system strong in space? Is it the same as being on Earth?
You know, as I unexpected, I'm looking so clever, so I'd be asking such questions. Okay. Okay, no, that's, again, it's different area of medicine, is space medicine. It's absolutely different. It's close to standard or Earth medicine, but it's a little different. All systems in space works in different way. And because our body, people, I say, not designed to live in space. And even we have countermeasure system that protect us from space factors, resistance, radiation, and other effects of microgravity. We not protected for 100%. And all systems are under the impact from our surrounding and space surrounding. That's why this part of business is very interesting. And by the way, the Boeing mentioned that we're going to have private space flyers, and better to say this private space flyers, real private space flyers, should be not tourists who just want to get extra experience from in their life, but better if it will be people from pharmacological industry, from biotechnology, from medicine, flying like a payload specialist who will perform some real science and good science in specific areas, including the space medicine and biology. So that's
okay. Great. You know, President Kennedy liked using the word leapfrog, particularly after Yuri Gagarin of Russia went into space, and then Alan Shepard. On May 25th, 1961, he made the challenge, we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, and we did. I want to go around each of you just briefly. What should be the big leapfrog now in space, where people are talking about going back to the moon and Mars and a new International Space Station, or what do you think are the big thing you'd like to see being done in the coming years that the world can get behind and understand as a big new leapfrog challenge into space?
So that's a huge question for each of us to plow through real quickly, but just on a real small scale, spacewalks are something that are near and dear to my heart, and I think about walking on the moon. We need a suit that can actually do that. Right now, if you put the current spacesuit we have on, you tried to bend over and pick a rock, you'd fall right over. You wouldn't be able to get up. And so that's some challenges. That's one in many series of lots of technical challenges, but I am excited about spacesuit development and how that allows us to walk on the moon and then Mars.
Perfect. You have one that any of you want to add one? Go ahead, Tracy.
You know, I don't, go ahead if you got one on top of your head. I was just thinking, I appreciate Chris starting off with that, because I think any one of us here are so close to the to the operations of today that it's kind of a leap to think about where we're going beyond Moon and Mars. I think that in between those, it's thinking about doing it right as opposed to doing it fast, so that we do not miss some of these important details. When you look back at the Apollo days of what all we were able to accomplish in a short period of time, the amount of focus that we had allowed us to think about everything in very simple terms. What do we need to get to here, to there, and beyond, to our mission? So having a very clear goal of what we're doing will rein everybody in. And right now, we have several different programs going on that are trying to leverage off of one another. And so I may not be answering your question, to the letter, but I think for me, the leapfrog is going to happen as long as we are all maintaining focus on the goal. And right now, it's we're maintaining the space station because the space station is the test bed. It is where we are learning how to live and operate and design in space, so that we can go to the moon, where we're going to learn more there about what we need to go beyond there to Mars. And so I'm just adding a comment that it's kind of difficult for us to think in broader than the vision that's already been laid out, because we're at the nuts and bolts level, knowing just how much focus goes into not only accomplishing these things, but doing it safely.
Very good. Do we have any questions in the audience? Are the microphones operable? There's a walking mic coming right up to you, ma'am. Right up here at the front, third row.
I thank you for your extremely exciting remarks, everybody. I'm wondering if any of you have flown with Indian or Chinese astronauts, and if any joint missions are planned with them.
None of us have flown with Chinese. No Indian crewmates either. The planned part of that is something that maybe we can invite Charlie Bolden after to tell us about, but none that I'm aware of.
But you had somebody from Belgium, right? Brazil at the International Space Station. Absolutely. Belgium, Brazil, Denmark, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, the Netherlands, South Africa, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, and the UK. So we could have had representatives from all those countries here who've experienced the International Space Station. Yes, the young lady there. Yes, down. Okay, both of you. Yes, sir.
I would think it would be hard to eat in zero gravity, because how would the food go down your throat without gravity pulling it?
Here you go, Paolo. Take it.
How do you swallow in space? Is there any difference eating food in that situation?
Do it, Paolo.
Go ahead.
I get that question all the time from kids like you, especially when I do things from school. So I do an experiment. I actually take a glass of water, a little straw, and then I take a kid like you and I turn it around. And I say, okay guys, who think he's going to drown or die, or can he drink? And I have 50%, oh yeah, you can, oh you cannot. You think you can drink upside down? No? Well, that's not true. If you would try, you will see that you can. Because the body works perfectly even if you're upside down, which somehow in a certain way simulates microgravity, kind of. So you can do the work. The body works perfectly. You have to be careful at the beginning. I don't know. The first time you go to space and you try to drink, you choke because the water stays there. Yeah. So you're used to gulp down a lot of water. And
I hope you just do this with your own kids.
No. I always see the teacher going like, no! All right, slow down. I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional. But it actually works. The body works anyhow, and you just have to get used to it. But it works, no problem.
I'll just add really quick that along those lines, that though food floats and everything else floats, that we have muscles in our body that help things get where they need to go, and that's not just with food going in. But if you think about it, though, everything in your body is floating. Everything in your body is experiencing microgravity, and so that's why when you see astronauts that are in space, they look a little full in the face. And also a lot of other effects that we can experience have to do with the fact that our organs are even floating a little bit, and the fluid inside of our body is floating. And so even though food, we can force it to go where it needs to go because we have muscles, that what you're thinking about in terms of things floating, there are things floating in your body, and it happens to be the blood, the fluids, and the organs. And so you do experience a little bit of that.
Very good. Great question. Yes, a young woman with there. What's your name?
Chloe,
Okay.
can you still get sick on the space station? Like, are there the same illnesses that are on Earth?
Sick.
Can you still get
Do you
sick?
get sick is
You
the
have the
question?
same illnesses.
Oh, do you have the same? Yeah, I've been trying to get it. They're asking, what's
Well,
getting
it's
sick
over
like in space? Do any of you been sick in space? And is there
We
recovery
have a
different?
pretty good crew medical care system on station and preventing for bringing up some infection to station. All crew members pass through quarantine before launch. Takes about 2 weeks. So we're pretty good protected from any influence in space. But from time to time, again, all we are humans, so it's possible to get sick, and not all, but at least 2 crew members trained as a paramedic program, so they probably are able to take care of other crew members with ground help using the telemedicine and any support on the ground team. And fortunately, during all my missions, I don't have any good patient with me.
Great. Migraines, things like that, nausea, people are always
But
worried
there
about.
are no
That's not good.
viruses on the space station.
Yeah,
There you go.
nausea
So you
is
cannot-
not a
No
disease
viruses.
in space. It's a normal
Okay.
condition.
So you don't get a flu.
Perfect. Yes, let's go right here, second row. What's your name?
My name's Jakaya.
Thank you.
Is there a time limit on how many days that you should be in space due to your body and your health?
Great question. Is there a time limit how many days you can stay in space due to your body's health? Is there a limit that a human body can?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good question. So we have, proved one Russian medical doctor, cosmonaut, flew in space for 132 days just during one flight. We have people who totally fly in space more than 900 days. So probably we're pretty good shape to understanding what flight 1 year mission is completely safe for all crew members. And recently we have 1 year mission, 1 Russian, 1 US astronaut flew together during 1 year, almost 1 year. Before, during the Soviet age, 6 people flew about 1 year, a little bit more than 1 year. So probably 1 year it's safe. Human research program and Russian medical program now looking forward to start planning another long duration missions aboard the ISS. It's going to be again 12 months, and next after that 18-month missions. And we're looking in perspective and forward to have 24-month mission during in ISS age. I don't know if we have volunteers from astronaut corps to do that.
2 years.
It's been a theme. I hope you all realize the day before John F. Kennedy was killed, he was in San Antonio talking about space medicine and how it's actually helping us understand life here on Earth, that the spin-off technology creates CAT scans and MRI, kidney dialysis machines, heart defibrillators, and the like. So it's a very rich field, space medicine. Yes, right here.
I was just wondering what some of the patches on your jumpsuits mean.
Yeah, what are each of your patches signifying?
Oh, go ahead.
So In general, you've got your country, you've got missions, your affiliated agency, so ESA, Roscosmos, NASA, JAXA, name tag, what else? Oh, the Mach 25, which was a shuttle patch because you went that fast, and a 100-day patch for those folks that have flown long duration. Am I missing any?
If you look really closely at Paolo's collar, he's got the astronaut symbol embroidered on his collar. That's,
The Italian, you know.
Good question. Yes. Right.
Over there.
I love getting these young people in. Right here, young man, stand, or young lady, either of you. Go ahead.
Actually, she was holding
Not so
her
young.
hand up for me. I was wondering if you were able to observe any effects of climate change over a period of time, or just from mission to mission, and if so, maybe 2 or 3 examples.
Great question. You were witnessing climate change
climate
that we're worried about here. You know, some people think the next moonshot should be an Earth shot due to climate change, but are you from your International Space Station, perch, able to detect any climate change issues?
Maybe I can mention a little bit. If many of us stayed for like half a year in the space station, and you can see the change of the season. For example, mountains, the snow is melting, but sometimes you see like pollution on the ocean and as well as in the air. But as far as change year by year, we take pictures and you have to compare those pictures. So within 6 months, it's hard to see. And we have a variety of satellites, as Ambassador Kennedy mentioned, that the global precipitation measurement, and then many CO2 measurement type devices are flying as a satellite. So we need to depend heavily on those satellites to monitor the changes of the global meteorological conditions. But we do take pictures, and then astronauts' photographs show the depletion of lake bed, for example, in like Lake Chad in Central Africa. By taking those pictures in a serious manner, you can see those irrigation water was taken out from the lake, and as a result, the surrounding area has changed, ecologically. So those are the things that we can provide to the public.
Great. That was a great question. Yes, let's go right over here.
Hi.
What's your name?
My name's Jessica.
Okay.
And I was just wondering about how you deal with, or what are the procedures for sharing resources, both those mined in space and those brought to space.
With what?
With sharing of resources?
That are mined in space or brought to space.
How do you share resources that are either mined in space or brought to space?
I think there's just a lot of coordination that happens before it gets there.
A lot of coordination?
Yeah, and
Go for it.
I think on a big scale, the International Space Station is a gigantic resource. And it's, we represent the countries that, or some of the countries that are invested in it. I would say there's got to be someone at the helm integrating everything. And so NASA is that entity that listens to all the partners and provides provides the resources as well as bring in what they need and what they want. And so on a big scale, that's one of our biggest examples of resources and how they are managed. And it really takes somebody able to see the whole picture and be able to delegate as well as distribute, coordinate those efforts.
You think having a moon base port would be helpful for this space station and others in the future to have for fixing parts and to get resources brought aboard?
I do. I mean, I think many of us, all of us here, have been a part of the space program when we transitioned from flying just shuttles to flying the International Space Station. And I remember that time because I came into the program during that transition, and there was this mystery out there of how are we going to coordinate with our international partners? How are we going to do this highly complex thing with other people and other people's, other cultures, other mindsets? And 20 years into it, without filling in all the details, I can tell you it is a beautiful thing, and I'd hate to see us go further into exploration without that partnership, that global partnership.
Yeah, I think NASA Chief Charlie Bolden said that former, you always will be our NASA chief. Mr. Bolden had said that any mission to Mars is likely to be global. You all agree with that would be the way to be, go global to Mars? Absolutely. You want Italy there, I have a feeling.
No. It has to be global. It's about time that we go and continue exploration as human race, as human beings. So this planet is big, but from space it's not that big after all. And we should work together,
Very good. We have so many questions. It's just wonderful. Where's the microphone? Okay, go ahead with the mic. And tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Fiona.
Okay.
What advice do you guys have for an aspiring astronaut?
Now, there's a good question.
Yeah. So I think we get that question all the time, and you'd probably get a similar answer from each of us. We all have different paths to arrive sitting in these chairs with our blue outfits on. And it doesn't matter the path. The path is one that you're passionate about. And what we care about putting together space crews are folks that can work together internationally, folks that work together on a personal level. And the technical stuff we can train, we can fill in, but you need to have a basis of technical knowledge. So that's important steps for you as you pursue your education in a technical field. But the choice of that exact path is up to you. And when you're passionate about it, you're going to do it great. And we look forward to you coming to work with us someday.
Yay. Yeah. Yes, go ahead. I don't know if you can see up front, but we must have like 60 people wanting to ask questions. Go.
Oh, hi.
Yes.
Without the atmosphere up there, is there any dangers of like radiation? And to a mission to Mars, like what kind of solutions or preventions would there be to, like, for prolonged space travel to prevent like the dangers of radiation?
Okay, let's go for it.
Medical guy.
Yes.
Okay, so that's talking about radiation. Radiation is probably the main issue what we have planning is space flight to the surface of the moon or to the Mars. And now we're working to create some passive barrier for radiation protection from radiation, as well as trying to schedule the mission in a way with we have less dose of radiation during this flight. But again, the main idea is if we have a more short flight, this means that our engineers are supposed to design the vehicle or thrusters that let us fly in a short time to Mars, if we're talking about the Mars and coming back. And for moon surface, mostly we're thinking about have maybe a moon base under the surface, having use regolith as a protection barrier for radiation for human moon base. But again, we're still planning to have a gateway, but gateway different with ISS won't be the permanent occupation station. It's visited by crew from time to time periodically and spend there no more 45 days for now. Maybe in future the space medicine and engineering community will help us to build some more protection and find the new way how to protect people from radiation. And definitely we will, in this case, we will have a great spin-off for for Earth science and people population on the Earth if we design how to protect radiation. Okay.
If I may add, I think we need to more accurately measure the radiation in Mars environment. There are many American probes that are on the surface of Mars, and I think we'll be sending more those radiation monitoring devices. Actually, Japan is launching in 2024 a Martian Moon Explorer mission That's not going to go to the Martian surface, but it's going to go to the moons, the Phobos and Deimos, and that will have a radiation monitoring capability to have a more accurate measurement. Before we send humans over there, we need to actually understand the environment of radiation in order to avoid that exposure as much as possible.
Okay, great. We have so many questions. Go ahead. What's
Hello.
your name?
Congratulations. Have the space junk affected the space station? And are you guys allowed to talk about aliens?
About aliens?
About aliens.
So I heard the question. I'll jump in here. You guys can chime in too. But the question was, has space junk affected the space station? And hold on the second part. Space junk is a huge risk for us. Launch day and landing day are obvious risks that we care deeply about. But if you plot risk over time, space junk, highly technical term there, but space junk is vitally important to our safety. And on different spacewalks I've been on, you can see little divots in the metal. I mean, small ones, like if you took a pen and jabbed it into a 2x4 piece of wood, you'd feel a little dimple. But you can see stuff like that, effects of little small pieces. And so far, there's not been one with enough energy to poke through that we know of. But and then the aliens part, I'll leave that to these guys.
Well, Jimmy Carter actually filled out a whole report of seeing a UFO in very great detail. Have any of you really seen an unidentified object in space with all the time there that you just could not make hide or hair of? I know that's sort of what the gist of the question is. If any of you, or you're not supposed to talk about it if you did.
We can talk, we're ready to talk, but I have never seen it yet.
Well, I've seen some extraterrestrial people. They were with me on the space station. We were outside of the Earth, so by definition we were extraterrestrial, I guess, right? But I haven't seen anybody else except the people that were up there on the station. Unfortunately, because I train to just salute just in case,
Hey, we've got time just for one last question, and I will let the microphone person direct me to the one. Well, wait, we have the young woman right here in the second row. I hate to make you guys run with the mic if you can. Here he comes.
Oh, he's got one.
All right, we're going to do two, and then we're about to end for time, but go ahead.
My question is, do you think if NASA had the same budget it had back in the 60s, that missions like Mars would have been accomplished already?
What was that?
I couldn't hear.
Do you think if NASA
Could you say
the same budget they had in the 60s, if they could go to the work already to Mars?
Yeah. That's a hard question.
No. So,
yeah. I think back in the answer, maybe I'll answer that. In the mid-1960s, on the Kennedy effect, NASA had a 4.4% of the federal budget. And they used to say in NASA, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. In other words, no bucks, no International Space Station, no Mars mission. Today, NASA gets about 1/3 of 1% of the federal budget. So we got to get more involved, and hopefully the 50th anniversary is going to make the American people galvanize more and try to fund all the great work that we're all doing. And we'll do this last question is to what's your name?
Hi, my name's Eleni.
Okay.
I was wondering, what are your thoughts about people in the future, like living on the moon or in space, and how do you think it would benefit us?
Great question. One of you want to take it on? What will be living on the moon like, and how do you envision it?
What comes to my mind when you ask that question is, again, going back to when I entered the program and the transition that we were making at that point. I saw a shuttle program which was robust, building an International Space Station. And in the very beginning, as we were starting this brand new program, and we were criticized for what were we going to do with this thing. And I just remember there being a lot of uncertainty, though, on a big scale but at the operational level, we understood what we needed to do. And watching how that has grown over the 20 years that it has been in space, and we have had a human presence on it continually, and those of us on the stage have been there. And some of us have been there from the very beginning, and certainly Charlie and Ellen in the audience, where we have seen it in its crudest form, if you will. And then to see where it is today, where in the beginning we were building this thing and we weren't talking about science. And today it is the national laboratory that it was designated to be. It is such a laboratory, coming from someone with a background in scientific research, that there's so many investigations going on that are meaningful to get us beyond where we are today, that it's a blessing to see how far we have come. And then those of us that are embedded in the operations, to see how efficient it is. And I know there's a number of people in this room that can appreciate what that does for a team, a project, to be efficient, to see how things have improved. That when I think about us going to the moon and what that means, that's another transition that we are going to take with it, this foundation of knowledge that we have brought not just from this country, but from all of the countries, and harnessed all of our experience, and we are setting foot on the moon. It's going to be a little uncertain in the beginning, but there's going to be a great foundation because of all of the work that's been done leading up to that point. And then it's going to be the next generation, like you, who are going to bring it through and make it that meaningful, productive work. I mean, we're setting the foundation right now, but what I see is a very productive place that our young people today are going to build and get us to the next place that we're going, which we all right now are looking at Mars.
And I will end by saying that, John F. Kennedy at his Rice University speech, September 12, 1962, talked about public discovery. We're not interviewing you today. We're all part of it. We're the human society, and we all are proud that we broke the shackles of planet Earth and that we're continuing to explore the moon and Mars and your amazing work in the International Space Station. It's been an honor to talk to you, and thank you for all the great questions. Thank you, Kennedy Library. Thank you.
One second. So, So that was remarkable. I was going to ask you to give a standing ovation, but you beat me to it. So, because it is a remarkable group. Thanks both to Ambassador Kennedy for introducing and bringing us all together, for Doug, for those insightful questions, for each of you, particularly. Let's hear it for the students and for the next year's invention. So if you're just joining us now, the museum is complimentary today, so I encourage you to have a chance to look through there. There is a space expo in the pavilion that, again, to take a look at. There is food for purchase both inside the museum and in the back. There's a barbecue there. The bookstore has a lot of materials, including Doug's book. We thank you for many of you who are members, and if you're not members, hope you'll consider that to become a member. You can text JOIN JFK to 44321. If you're coming back to one of the other sessions later, hold on to your ticket. The tickets are critical for next session. Join me again to thank all of them. Thank you.